Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. Connie, can you believe we're in week 4?
I know, it's amazing. We've
It
had
is
so much
amazing.
fun.
We have had so much fun, and we just thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone a few minutes for the other group on Facebook to join us. So just grab a cup of coffee, water, whatever your favorite beverage is for the evening, and just sit back and relax. We have a lot to unpack this tonight, so we hope you all are ready. And we look forward to spending the next hour with you.
This is going to be a good one.
This is going to be a
Yeah,
fantastic
I know we said
one.
that the other time, but
Yes, we did.
this is going to be good.
It will be fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. Week 4. Connie, it's hard to believe this is week 4. We were just saying this
Yeah.
is so exciting, and we have a lot to unpack tonight. This will be so good. So thank you again for being with us. We just thank you for taking the time to join us for this series. And before we get started, we want to open up in prayer. So please join us in prayer. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you for who you are. We thank you we can call you Abba Father. Lord, we just thank you for this time. I thank you for Connie, Lord, and just her obedience to write this book and her willingness to do this webinar series with us. We thank you for every person who's joined in listening, Lord, and just may this be a time of encouraging each and every person watching or listening to this. May they just see the hope that they have through you as they are on this journey of parenting their teens. And may this just be a time of equipping them with exactly what they need. And we give you all the glory, praise, and honor in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you again. And Connie, I so enjoyed these 2 chapters. I know we talked a little bit earlier because here at House of Hope, these 2 chapters were so relevant to the work that we do with the teenagers. And as I read through these chapters, I found myself not so much chuckling, but somewhat chuckling because I've heard so much and have seen it, firsthand. But you have a quote in chapter 7. Listen up. If parents want to maintain a position of influence in their teen's life, they have to learn to listen well. And I just really love that quote. And I know that was something that you had mentioned. But you talk about why is listening so important, and you go into different things. So just share with us and just kind of unpack for us.
Listening's hard, isn't it?
It is. It can be.
And
at times.
I'm a speaker. I'm a talker, and I want to make sure somebody understands what I'm saying. And so I want to fix things. And if you're a parent, a grandparent, you want to fix things. You want to help solve a problem.
Right.
Problem is, your kids aren't problems to solve. They're not people to fix. And I learned the hard way when I was writing Parenting Beyond the Rules. I did come to realize that my kids identified me as a world-class lecturer. And I found that, lecturing doesn't really work. You're not really getting to the heart of the matter. So that's why I said, if you want to maintain that position of influence, you have to learn to listen. It takes intentionality and practice. We have to practice, and we have to find ways to make us, hold back those wisdom, that nuggets that you've learned over the years. We have to learn when it's appropriate, and we have to just remember God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And when we practice the art of listening, which we'll talk about, our children respond to it. But when we don't, like we talked about last week, and if you haven't seen the others, make sure you go back and watch those. Yes. But if you don't listen, then there's some key elements that happen in the relationship, and that's your kids primarily don't feel heard. And we all want to be heard.
Yes, we do want to be heard. And it's so important with, especially I think the teenage years. It's that, time where they're trying to navigate, okay, yes, I still, need some instruction, but I want to do it myself. And I'm wanting my parents' guidance, but they're wanting that independence. And so just talk a little bit about that as far as, some ways that parents, how they can apply that.
It's funny how we think about as your kids are growing up. They really are growing up. They're seeing something that they're running to. It's freedom, I get to make my own decisions. I get to live my life the way I want to live it. we also see the dangers, the pitfalls, the trouble that they could easily get into. And so as our kids are trying to pull away, we're trying to not pull back to keep them near us or keep them from excelling, but we're trying to make sure they don't get themselves in all sorts of trouble, and that they do take cautious steps. And when it comes to listening, there's a lot of value we learn as we listen. And as it pertains to your question, when you and I are having a conversation, I know Carla and I were talking on the phone, and I said, you always look like she's listening, she's focused, she's looking me in the eye, she'll have nodding of the head of I understand, I hear you. And when we start to listen, and we listen to our kids and we're looking at them, we want to hear what they have to say. I want you to realize something, that God delights in what we're doing. God delights in parenting. He delights in us raising our children. And when we realize that God delights in that, the act of God listens to us. Yeah. We want to listen to our kids. And when we take the time to listen to our kids, that delights the Lord. And when we listen, they feel valued and heard, and we can then draw them in, because our kids are like, well, you're not overreacting. You're not coming back at the 3 steps that I need to do to work out this problem or solve this crisis. You're not. And as we realize, Carla, as the kids are growing up, they will make some mistakes, and we don't want them to. Boy, we don't want them to. Right. But they will, and that's part of the growing up process. If they're talking to us, because we have fostered this community of openness with suspending judgment. Don't judge immediately what they said. And I did that, and that's part of why I wrote about Parenting Beyond the Rules, listen up, because your kids are telling you something they desperately want to tell you. And at House of Hope, that's one of the number one things that you hear from these kids is, my parents don't listen to me. And that's what I hear every time I go somewhere and I'm talking about parenting and about keeping the heart of your child or getting your children to do what you ask. It starts with the parent. It really does.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the benefits of listening to your teen, the parents. And if you haven't read the book, or if you haven't ordered it, it is so valuable in the information that's in there. But you talk about the benefits of listening to your teens. So share a little bit about that.
Well, some of the benefits are that your kids will talk. It's just, we think that's not, we take that for granted. But if we're willing to listen, our kids will usually talk. If they know we're going to suspend our judgment, we're going to be slow to react, slow to respond, slow to correct, slow to marginalize, but we're going to be quick to hear. Another benefit is it as a human being, which your child is a human being formed and molded and shaped into the person God has made them to be. They feel valued and they feel honored, like I matter. I know we've talked about this before, but as our kids get older, they don't pick the school, they don't pick the bedroom, the paint color. Sometimes you let them. They usually don't even get to go buy their own groceries. They're eating whatever's supplied at the school lunch, or they have very few choices. So the simple act of listening just makes them feel, as a human, as a member of your family, valued and worthy. It teaches them to become better listeners.
Yeah.
It takes restraint, it takes discipline, it takes intentionality to just slow your response and hear what the other person has to say. And here's an example, Carla, I was thinking about it as we were talking. When you're talking to somebody, how many times do you interrupt and you think, oh, I know what they're going to say, so I'm just going to say it now. I'm going to save us both some minutes by me just telling you, no, you can't go do that, because I know that's what you're getting ready to ask me to do. Or your child's coming to you and like, Mom, I'm just really struggling. I really don't like this teacher, whatever it is. And you jump in. The minute you jump in, they feel as if what they have to say isn't worth your time. You're too busy. You're You already know what they're going to say, and none of us, especially our children included, they don't want to feel like what they have to say isn't worthy of being heard, even if it's something that you don't want to listen to. It matters to them.
Right.
So that's another thing that it communicates. It earns, and we talked about this several times, and you'll see all throughout Parenting Beyond the Rules, trust. I was speaking recently at a conference. I travel around the country speaking, and I had a father come up to me just weeping. And it's common, it's not stereotypical, but it's common that a mom will come and she will break into tears.
Right.
More frequently than the dads. And it's not a stereotypical or a judgment thing, but it just caught me how broken this dad was. And he said, and we talked about this, I was raised, this is how it is.
Yeah.
And I have been doing it with my 13-year-old. And my 13-year-old has said, I don't think so. You don't listen to me. All you do is tell me what to do. You don't care about how I feel. You don't. And he was broken, and he said, I was raised here, and my child is saying this. I don't know how to get here. How do I get here? I said, there's freedom in the pivot.
The pivot.
It starts.
The pivot.
It starts by
adjust the sails.
Yes. It starts by being willing to say, like this father was, I don't know how. Your kids are not looking for perfect parents, and we'll talk about that. They're not looking for perfect parents. They are looking for a relationship. And they are looking for a parent, grandparent, caregiver, ministry leader who's willing to just listen to the ramblings. Some kids just chat. They're chatty. And some kids, I'll have parents say, but Connie, I'm doing all of that, and I ask them, how you doing? Tell me about your day. It was fine. That can be irritating.
You really have to draw it out of them.
That can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show you that I care about you. I'm trying to show you that I'm interested, and all I get is, I'm fine. Yeah. We're trying here. Help me out. And then that causes frustration because one is trying and the other has just said, well, sometimes, Carla, as you know, some children, they're internal processors. They're not going to tell you everything they're thinking. They don't need to. They have to really think about it, formulate their opinion, formulate their thoughts. Then when they trust you, because they know when they do start to talk, those ears are going to be wide open. And your other children, and some of your other children, they'll just tell you about everything. Every thought they have comes right out of their mouth. And that requires a different set of listening skills. But as a parent, you can develop both. And it takes practice. And it takes knowing the why we're trying to do this. We want to earn their trust. We want them to feel valued and have worth. We want them to share the stirrings of their heart, because then we know how to pray for them. We know how to encourage them. We're not sitting there thinking, okay, now I need to address this so that I can fix you. I need to correct it. I need to correct this because this is going in a bad direction and I just need to stop it right here. If your child's involved in something that is quite dangerous, yes, you do have to do that.
Right.
But for the most part, if it's not, there's leeway and there's time and there's an opportunity for mom and dad or caregiver, grandparent. There's opportunity for them to just step back and say, there's a lot going on and I need to consider my response. Again, going back to the parent, children are learning and they're learning from you. And so you model to them what that looks like, which just means you tell them, hey, I'm learning this. I'm going to try something new. Will you help me? Invite them into that process.
Right. You made a comment in the book, and you've in a couple of places at least, and I love this, and I think it goes along with what we're saying. Your kids, they want to be heard. The teens, they want to be heard. They want that relationship because if they're not getting it from you, they're getting it from somewhere. So someone is, if you're not listening to them, if the parent's not listening or not taking the time to listen or to hear the teen, someone is. And hopefully that person is you, because obviously in this, in today's culture and society, and it's been like this, through the years, but the parents, that is the ones who have the greatest impact on the teens, on their children. And so you make that comment, I know, about they're going to get it from somewhere. So
I know.
And that's always important to remember.
I'm very much, I used to work for a social media company, and early on when I saw social media come on the scene, as my background is public relations and marketing, and I saw, there's something there.
Yeah.
And so I've watched it ebb and flow, but I really started noticing when my children, and not all of my children are involved, they use social media to promote their businesses. They don't get on social media to, look at the likes or draw attention to themselves. They're really promoting their businesses. I noticed in my own kids, because they get a phone, there's that age, they start to get a phone, and you just see this. They're sitting, and we've talked about this before, they're sitting right there and they're doing this. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty too. My children have corrected me and said hello. And that's part of listening. When they say something that you're doing, and we'll talk more about that, but when they say something that we're doing, are we receptive? Do we put up a wall? Do we say, well, I'm the parent, or, well, it doesn't apply to me. You're the child. They are the child. You are the parent. You have the authority that is given to you by the Lord. But between that and where your child is this gap. And the gap is filled by you saying, oh, yeah, I need to be better at putting down my own phone when you're asking me a question, or I need to be better at just stopping and looking at you so you feel like I hear you. So much, Carla, and I write about this, is learned from body language. And we talk about that in Parenting Beyond the Rules. There's the spoken word, but then there's the silent language. I want to encourage you, be a student of the silent language, the body language, the body gestures, when they're leaning in, and when your kids are talking to you, lean in. Let them know that they matter, that you matter so much to me. I want to lean in. Something happens, when we're talking about our relationship with the Lord, we lean into the Lord. It's because we want to hear what He has to say. When we lean into our children, that's communicating to them, I want to hear you. What you say is important to me. I want to hear the struggles you're having. I want to hear the joys and the celebrations that you're having. And if you want to talk, my ears are open. And I respect if you don't. Because remember, there's that internal thinker and there's that external processor.
Right.
And you just need to know the child you have. The key, and I say this often, is you parent the child you have, not the one you wish you had.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
That's important. That is important. You talk a little bit about the art of listening. And you talk about 3 different things that, how a parent can, learn the art. So expand on that a little bit, if you would.
I want to talk about listening when we have to say, like, your kids don't expect you. They expect you to be flawed. But what can happen is when your children are little, they just take whatever, and that's the construct of their childhood. When they hit adolescence, they deconstruct that childhood and they remake it into whatever they happen to view their childhood as like. You want to be really careful of revision history with your childhood. Like, no, and my kids will do that, and it's not because they're trying to be bad. It's that when you're a child, you see as a child, you think as a child, that's the memories and stuff that you have. As a parent, part of the skill of learning is a skill of listening is helping them realize what they saw, what they heard, in the context of what they saw and heard, and be careful that they're not fault finding. They're not, and I don't know if that's what you're asking me to do, but as I was thinking about our day today and my conversations with some folks as I was speaking, there's a lot of adolescents right now that are in the revisionist childhood, and we want to be careful of that. And the only way you're going to know that's happening is by talking with them. Do you remember this? How do you remember when that happened? Or the fault finding, where they're placing blame on everybody but them. When I said we need to help our kids become listeners, we also need to help them become listeners to the words that they speak, as we'll transition into that. We also want to, when they do learn how to listen and we practice listening, we are actually helping them become better at building relationships. Better at building friendships, better at trusting other people, not just the parent-child, but maybe the sibling, maybe the friend. And we don't immediately, well, that's the other topic we want to talk about, but we want to be open to our part. And we want to be quick to show them that we're not going to start with them and what they did wrong. Tell me what happened. I heard this and that. Start with the simple things of, so when this happened, or how are you feeling about this, or I asked you to do something, did you hear what I was asking you to do? Did you understand what that was? And ask for clarification. And clarification is a part of listening. In business, we do that. You know, you're working with somebody and you'll ask them, this is what I heard you say. We do the same thing with our children. When they say something, or when you're saying something, ask your children, what did you just hear me say? And then they may tell you something very different, because what you say isn't always what they hear. And that happens to you as well. Your child may be frustrated and they say something and you take it a certain way, but that really might not be what they mean. We have to remember that adolescents, they don't always get their words right on the first go round. Some of them really struggle.
Right.
Some of them react and they say hurtful things that they don't really mean, but they're just reacting because, you know, we feel safe with our family. You know, we've had a bad day and we go home, and your children go home, and they've been dealing with the world and all of its struggles and pressures and peer pressure and conformity and political correctness. And they come home and sometimes they will externally just go, poof.
Yeah.
Listen to it. Wow, that had to have been hard. Wow, nod in agreement when they're talking to you. Let them know, oh man, I don't know how I would have handled that. How did you handle that? How did you respond when that happened? Did you just walk away? Those techniques are a skill set. We're teaching them, they're learning to practice, we're learning to practice, and they feel heard. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And as you were talking about how in the business world and our work environment, we will answer back to the person, oftentimes with a question. I know in a previous place where I worked, that was something that our boss, he had us do. It was called mindful communication. And it was fantastic in the effectiveness of the practice of when someone asks you a question or makes a statement, responding back with a question, did I understand you correctly, or am I understanding you? This is what I heard, and just repeating it back to them to make sure that that is exactly what is being said, and that, you know, both parties are, you know, have the correct understanding. So it's so important.
And it's really hard.
It is, yeah.
If you're doing this via text.
Yes, that would be difficult.
I mean,
a little challenge there.
You know, I'm like you. I'm on my phone, and I will text my kids today, and I'll say something, and I know in my mind if I were saying words, they would come out with voice intonation, and there would be
Right.
certain stressors. And when your children read those words, when your children are listening to you, and when it's a verbal versus a reading, you have to be thinking about that specific child. I had that happen recently. I sent one of my kids a text, and I got this long explanation, and I text back like, I wasn't bothered. I was just asking you a question. So it doesn't end. It doesn't end at 17 or 18. It continues on. That's why we do it in business, because the ability to communicate thoughts and ideas is something we learn to master. Some kids get it really easy. And especially if their personality traits connect and align with you, you just get each other. Then some of your kids you don't get. You don't understand how they think. You don't understand, like, if you say, would you take out the dog? One of your children would be, let's just say you have a dog, you take out the dog, one of your kids will be like, oh, sure, no problem. It's just, it was a simple command. Good. The other one will be, why do you have to say it like that? Why? I heard you the first time, and you want to be like, well, then why didn't you do it the first time? And they're hearing this, Carla, we've mentioned this before, but when you're learning to communicate a thought, an idea, think very strategically about how they're going to hear what you have to say. And realizing their brains are developing, not developed. They're trying to figure out, and the day that you may say a specific thing, or they want to come and talk to you, or maybe they've been bullied, they're not sure how to share what's happened. Maybe they have been a victim of some, I don't mean of a crime, I just mean they've been hurt or wounded by a friend, and they really don't know how to process it. Their self-esteem has been crushed, there's been wounds. We want, as a parent, we want to draw them into the conversation, and the way we draw them into the conversation is literally grabbing your cup of coffee and going for a walk or going for a drive, and just let them start talking with no agenda. Not trying to manipulate the conversation, because they're pretty smart. They get it. They know, oh, that's why you asked me to go get a donut, because you wanted to find out about this and that. No, just say, hey, we haven't talked in a while. I want to hear what's going on. What's making you happy these days? What are you grateful for? What are you thankful for? What are you struggling with? And just sit. Sit in silence. Just be. And in that time of silence, the kids start to go, oh, you've slowed your pace long enough. You're not so busy. And that's kind of like the art of listening is really learning to slow down long enough and not be so busy with the cares and the busyness of life that you don't have time, that you're on this circle, and they get you every couple, they'll get your attention every few minutes or every couple of days. No, we want to make sure that our children know that we're always available.
And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
I know.
The hindrances to recognizing the hindrances. Before we get there, you talk about the listening to resolve conflict.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
At House of Hope, you deal with a lot of teens. The ministry's been going on for almost 36 years.
Yeah.
And there are similar responses year after year, whether we're in a pandemic, whether we're in good times or bad, families still struggle. It's why you're here, and that's why you've continued to be here for these families. Let me ask you, what are some of the reasons that you hear kids voice they're having conflict with their parents?
Number one is my parents don't listen to me. My parents don't listen to me, or they don't hear what I'm trying to say to them.
Oh, that's
so, it's, are you hearing and listening? And one of the things that we do here at House of Hope is, obviously by the time they come to House of Hope, it's in crisis mode. And so right off the bat, with the counseling, it's one-on-one with the teen, and it's one-on-one with the parent or parents. And in those counseling sessions, it will come up, the listening and the hearing, being heard and that sort of thing. And, oftentimes the parents may say, well, all they do is argue with me. And so at some point in time, the counselors will have the parents write down some things regarding the teen, like what is going on during those times. What is it that you feel the teen isn't hearing from you, or that sort of thing? And same with the teen, where the teen will write some things down. The counselor will write down, or the counselor will have the teen write down some things. And then they will talk separate with each one. And oftentimes the counselor may say, okay, next time, like to the parent, they may give the assignment, can you name maybe 5 things that you love about your child, like positive, the positive words, and we'll get into that. But they will also write down, like, well, what do you think you can do to improve in this area? And then eventually what they'll do is they'll bring the two of them together. And at some point at the right time, when the counselor says, okay, now it's time, and they'll come together, and they will share and they will work out, and they'll go through some exercises and that sort of thing of helping them to learn to both listen and be heard. But that is one of the number one things is they don't listen. They don't take the time to hear me.
When I was writing and doing the research for Parenting Beyond the Rules, we had been working with kids for over 20 years. I mean, really just in different ministries, in our home, and throughout what we were doing. That was the number one thing. They would come to me, and I would be pretty much a stranger. Someone they saw, they knew I had a bunch of children, and they wanted to talk to somebody that would sit for a minute and say, how's that going? And the number one thing, Carla, is my parents don't listen. And then if I said, well, why don't you try? They'll take away my phone. They'll ground me. They won't let me hang around these friends. They won't believe me. That's a big one. They won't believe me. There's an honesty issue going on there. And maybe your child has just thought about what they want to do, and maybe they have told you a few lies, maybe a bunch of lies. Your children are aware of that. Right. But they don't trust me, they don't believe me. The trust me is funny. We've heard that forever. You don't trust me. And you'll say, oh, but I trust you, I just don't trust others. Well, sometimes you don't trust them. No. And sometimes you don't trust them because they haven't shown to be able to navigate. Not that they're not trustworthy, but they're not able to navigate things. And when we think about resolving conflict with our kids, and you've got these two opposing views, the parent who wants to teach and protect and train their child, at least, and definitely keep them from getting in harm's way. Right. And you have the child who's trying to assert themselves and grow up and make their own decision, and I am the king of my castle, and I should, rule over my own life. And we have a society that tells them, hey, you're an adult, and they're 12. You should be making your own decisions. Your parents shouldn't be telling you what to do. You need to tell your parents how it's going to be. So your children are getting this input from society, by and large, and it's coming in everywhere. And you're thinking, oh, we're just this little family, and we're going to sit down, we're going to talk it all out. And they're thinking, no, I've got to fight against you. I've got to grow up. You're holding me back. You're not going to hear me. And that's the whole part, Carla, where it's not about, Mom, you getting all your words out and you telling your children all the reasons why they're wrong. It's about you letting them be able to share and not reacting immediately. Just listen. Yeah. There's time to respond. Like you were saying, you let them talk and talk and talk, and at a point, then we take the next step. But if we're in a battle of who's going to win, both are going to lose. Right. Because Mom may win the short term, but the child has decided, you can make me do that on the outside, but you're not making me do it on the inside. Right. If we don't have their heart, the motivation to do what we're asking them to do, fails. And then we're just in a constant battle. You speak, they react. They speak, you react. And neither one of you is moving anywhere closer to that relationship. So we have to realize that. Some of the things I talk about, Carla, is going to your child and saying, I haven't been very good at listening. And list your reasons. I'm afraid. You've done things that maybe have made me not trust you. I don't listen because, I've been really busy, and I haven't shown and made you the priority that it needs to be. And there's some powerful words you can say. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I want to work on that. Can you tell me what areas you feel I don't listen to you? Because you probably listen to a lot. More than likely you listen to 90%. There's some areas pockets, maybe they're hot button issues for a parent. Maybe they're triggers necessarily for a parent.
Right.
And so the minute that topic's up, mom and dad, intervene, boom, and the child knows, well, I can't go there. And if they can't go to you, just look at who they're talking to online. There's people out there that just really want to listen to your kids for the time being. We want to have them want to tell us the stirrings, the struggles, the secrets, the things that make them feel safe, secure, protected. And there's a difference. And that they know that we will not only defend and protect them, but we're going to hear why they're afraid in the first place. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
And it does start with the parents.
It does.
It really does start with the parents. And I hate to say
totally.
that because you could pretty much ask any of my children and they'll be able to rattle off exactly, what my steps were when I was going to be available to listen. But I tried.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, they're not expecting you to get it all right. They are expecting you to work at it.
Yeah.
And they are expecting you to engage in the conversation and be honest. And when you mess up, when you interrupt, like I talked about that story with my daughter in the book.
Yeah.
Your children, you've got to understand this. Your children, by the time they hit adolescence, they already know what you think, feel, and believe. They pretty much know the answer to what they're going to ask before they ask it. Do they still feel safe to ask? Or do they know you're immediately going to say, no, I already told you, we've decided this is just not going to happen. No, don't ask me ever again.
Yeah.
Let them know, we're not going to do this, not now. Maybe let's revisit this. As you grow and mature, then come back and let's talk about this again. Tell me why. Why is this so important to you? And then, and I think we talked about this, and then ask them to go pray. Will you go pray about this? Because I want to hear from the Lord, and I want to raise you the best that I can, as imperfect as I may be. Will you go pray that if this is something the Lord wants for you, that He's going to move my heart. He's going to change Dad and I's heart. And two things happen, Carla. Their faith grows. They realize, you mean I can go to God and pray? Yeah,
Right.
you can. And you mean God could actually change your heart, Mom and Dad? Yes, He can. And make sure that you are actually asking the Lord. And if you feel that stirring, you go to that child and say, you know what, I have been praying about it. And either I still don't think that's a good idea. Please trust me. Or I don't think right now is the time. Will you wait with me? Will you keep praying over this? Or, we thought about it and we absolutely, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. They feel heard. They feel valued. They feel seen. They feel that they have power to go to an active living God, which is ultimately what we want them to do as adults, right?
Right. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because that is so important. There is definitely power in prayer. And just, being that example as the parent, to tell the child, tell your teen, hey, pray about this. And we'll be praying too, that is so important. And that's one of the, so much of the core of the program here. It's prayer, all the time. So thank you for sharing that, Connie. Let's talk a little bit about the hindrances
Yes.
to listening. I know you touched upon that a little bit. Expand on that a little bit more, if you would.
Well, busyness is a hindrance. And reacting quickly, reacting negatively, immediately pointing out what's wrong is a hindrance. But it also is a hindrance because you're not helping them, your child. And I know you have some specific things there, but you're not helping your children when you're not willing to actively become a better listener. You're actually hindering them from developing that skill and that art of listening. And there were a couple things I wrote down in here. But when you don't listen, you're basically invalidating them as a thinking, problem-solving kind of person, which is really where we want them to become.
Right.
When we don't listen to our children and the hindrances of not wanting them to fail, not wanting them to make poor decisions, wanting to control them. Another hindrance is that we have by not listening is it can make them mad and mad at us. We don't want to be governed by fear, but there's no reason to stir that up just because we want to have the last say, or we want to say that idea or that suggestion isn't warranted. It also, a hindrance is when we don't care. And sometimes we don't really care. And we love them, but sometimes we're busy by the cares of life. We love our children, and that's a hard thing to say. And we probably wouldn't say, I don't care. But if we're not fully present and fully engaged, they don't feel like that we care about them. And that's an important aspect for us to always consider. Trying to think of our time. And I'm like, we have a lot to cover.
We do. And so on that, we will, let's move into chapter 8, monitor your mouth. And I love this chapter as well. I know one of the things that we do here at House of Hope, we really try to encourage both the teens and the parents on the words that they speak. And I know we were talking earlier, and Sarah has a book that she wrote several years ago, Let's Weigh Our Words. And this is available online, nationalhousehope.org, under resources. It's a great book. And in there, she talks a little bit about, obviously, the scripture in Proverbs, life and death are in the power of the tongue. And in James, I think they talk about, how to tame your tongue and that sort of thing. And you talk about, our words can do one of two things. You can either build up your teen with confidence, or they can cause hurt and separation. So talk a little bit about that.
In listening, that's kind of like there's a marriage there. These are, honestly, I love the chapters in the book, but listening and monitoring your mouth, those are like the crux. They're like the meat in between that makes or breaks everything else.
Right.
The listening, the speaking. I love Sarah's book. Our words can cut to the core. They can be so powerful that when your child attempts to do something, before they even try, they'll stop. Because you've told them they can't. They're not good enough. They will fail. They're not smart enough. They're not skilled enough. They're not whatever it is.
Right.
That is riding on their heart, Carla, and our kids don't forget that. That is why we have to monitor our mouth so much. And your second part with I was just kind of looking at this and I thought, meaningful conversations usually start with unimportant questions. So if you want to get your kids talking to you, ask them unimportant questions. And when we think about monitoring our mouth in this context, when there's hurt, there's separation from the relationship. And it's hard to get that back. Kind of comes back under trust. Again, can I trust you with my,
Right.
can I trust you? Am I safe? also words are life-giving, where one time we can say something to our children and we cut them to the core and they think they're not smart enough they're not athletic enough, they're not gifted enough to try or reach or even dream. And I think we've talked about this before, but our children are born, they're expansionists. Everything, the world is, what if?
Right.
What's next? What's possible? And then as they go through life, school, friends, correction, teaching, training. See, Deuteronomy 6 talks about teach and training your children in the way they should go. That's not about putting your children in a box. It's teaching them the way they should go. And so that whole dynamic of giving them life, making them believe, I can do that. I can try. I might fail. I might not be the best at it. But they also tuck those words deeply in their heart. And they're going to draw from two pools: the hurt, the rejection, the pain, the sarcastic comment, the way you said it. Tone means so much. Or they can draw from I really don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure. I'm looking around at everybody else and they're like way better than me. But you told me that I could. How many coaches on a team?
Yeah.
How many players on a sports event, on a sports team? They go further, faster, they try harder because there's somebody over here going, you can do it. You know the play. You know it. It's in your head. Get it all out of there. You can do that. And all of a sudden, we kind of like sit up a little straighter. Our chest gets a little higher. Our confidence starts to grow because of the power of your words. Mm-hmm. And that is why I wrote Monitor Your Mouth. Because it's so important that the words that we say, the tone, the phrasing, all of that those words, they come out and they land in a tender place of your child's heart. Yeah. And when you think of listening and you think of monitoring your mouth, they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And when you think about, I'm talking to this child who resists everything I say. They argue with everything that I say. If I say, do this, they're like, I don't want to do that. Or if you say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this later. I'm going to do it on my time frame. When your words are seasoned, just like a dish, like your favorite food dish, your favorite meat, when you're seasoning a vegetable or you're adding salad dressing, you're throwing all this in there and you're adding those and you're tossing it up. That's all going into the making of the relationship. That all goes into keeping your child's heart. It's the life-giving words. It's a little bit here and a little bit there. It's not long, drawn-out conversations that your children don't want to have.
Right.
It's a look. Mm-hmm. It's a nod. It's a gentle touch. It's simple. It's so simple, but yet difficult at times, especially when your children are saying things to you that are cutting. Yeah. They're hurting. They're telling you, you're a terrible mom. You're a terrible dad. You don't listen. You're like, I do too listen. You just won't talk to me. Well, I tried talking to you last year and you wouldn't listen to me, so I'm done. And you think we've got to repair that and we've got to rebuild that. Yeah. And in Sarah's book, she has some great nuggets for a parent to consider.
Yeah.
And I want to say it. That's my call to you is to get your kids to consider what you're asking them to do, what you're teaching them, how you're leading and guiding them. Get them to consider it. It all begins with how you formulate those few words and how they come out of your mouth.
It's so true, and I want to share a little bit, just going back to what I was saying earlier about here at House of Hope, and so many of the teens who do come and they feel so defeated. And as the counselors are unpacking, getting to the root of the issue, and they will find, oh, okay, there's been a lot of negative words spoken in regards to the teen, because of, for whatever reason, whether they're, being rebellious, angry, whatever it is the behavior is. And the parents just don't know what to do, and they're exasperated. And so oftentimes what our counselors will do, they will have, and I shared a little bit about this, but they will have them write little blessings. And I know Sarah, in one of the chapters about, how I think it's in Deuteronomy in the Old Testament where, so many of our forefathers, they would speak blessings. You had Abraham, and they would speak blessings over their children and pray over the children, and the importance of that. And we teach that to the parents here who are going through. And so we will have the parents do an exercise where they may have to write down some things, about their child, and then it would be maybe shared with that teen in a private session if they're not doing it together yet. And then eventually the same thing, the teen will have to write down, a list of 3 to 5 things that they really love about their, parent, and eventually come together. And so it will help them. And oftentimes it's so amazing because we will see, like, the teen will be like,
to just go,
my mom said that, or my dad said that, like, oh,
about me?
Wow. And they'll be like, they'll have a huge grin. And same thing where the mom or dad will say, oh my goodness, my daughter said that. Wow. And so it just really, it makes such a huge difference. And we see it firsthand.
So why do you think it's so hard?
I think it is, that's a great question, Connie. And I think what happens is in the busyness of life and the pressures and the stresses, and, parents are working and teens, as they're getting older, they're trying to navigate this really difficult time frame. And it's so much of, I don't know how to do this. And I think oftentimes because our time is being, there's so many demands in so many different directions. And I don't think that, several years ago, I think about like my parents and my grandparents, obviously you didn't have social media, and, TV wasn't around. So there was more time for parents and for families to be together. And now you've got sports, you've got school, and the demands of school, have even increased, even from the time, I was in school, which has been several years. But I think so much of it is just in our today's society and the demands of time, but also just the pressures and it's just, the frustrations with everyday life. I think it just gets really challenging. And it's a reactive, out of either my teen isn't listening, they're rebelling, and so it's just that reactive, why didn't you do what I told you? This, how hard is this, type thing. But yeah.
So I think what I'm, and this is kind of like modeling it. This is modeling what we were just talking about. So really, Carla, what I was hearing you say is parents need to stop and they need to think about, are my words helpful?
Yeah.
Are they harsh? Or are they hurtful?
Right.
When we pause, it doesn't take long, but it takes me saying, I want to make sure that when I speak, my children hear my love, my respect, my care, my value of them as a person, like how I view them as amazing. Your kids often don't think you think much more than they are just a distraction or a setback or a diversion from you having all the fun you want to have, because you gotta feed these kids again. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. And sometimes that's what our kids feel. Yeah. But if you pause and you say, are my words helpful? And I don't mean, am I giving them 6 quick steps to solve that problem? That if they would just listen to you, you do have wise, you've been around, you've lived longer. I get that. I'm the same way. Can we just cut 10 minutes off this conversation and let me just tell you the 3 things you need to go do? You go tell that friend to do blah, 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 and that you're going to do blah, 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 blah. Great. We had a great conversation. We'll see you later. Yeah. No, that's not the kind of helpful. I'm talking about the kind of helpful is if the words that you're speaking to your children hear the heart behind them. Are they harsh? Sometimes, Carla, as you know, when as you've worked with so many kids, when we're in a hurry when we're under pressure, when we're having issues with maybe another sibling, another child, one of their siblings is acting up or acting out, and then this one does something just at the wrong moment, and we're just like harsh.
Yeah.
They remember that.
Yeah.
And are our words hurting? Hurting meaning, you're wearing that? Why are you wearing all that? Why are you doing all of that? You need to stop. That's not how we... Are our words hurting them, or are we lifting them up?
Yeah.
And I know we're coming close to our time wrapping up here, but monitoring your mouth and learning to listen up. Those two, when you get Parenting Beyond the Rules, and I interviewed some ladies on my podcast, and she was a doctor of psychology, and she was raised in a home where her mother was always right, and she was constantly trying to get her approval. Even how she loaded the dishes was corrected. But she wanted to learn how to do that. So her mom would say, well done, that's so good. Thank you for being mom's helper. Thank you for doing this for me. But if the glass wasn't put in the dishwasher at just the right place, that's not how you load a dishwasher. We don't do it that way. Come, get out of the way. Let me do it. And the kid's like, that's a great idea. You do it. That's not the goal. But did you hear her say, that's not how you load a dishwasher? Is there not more than one way to load a dishwasher? Yeah.
Yeah.
Her words were harsh, but she kept trying, and she kept trying. Your kids will keep trying. Some will continue to try because they want to hear those words from you. Good job. That's amazing. You're awesome. I appreciate you. Sometimes your children will say, I'm never going to get it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to get it. But it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. The words that you speak to your children can make them feel as if they can do anything. Those dreams are achievable. That problem that they're facing, they can overcome it and they can get on the other side.
Yes, and I love what you said earlier. You were sharing about the man that came up to you at the conference, and he said, I don't know how to do it different. Yeah. And I just want to encourage each and every one of you. Isaiah 41:10. I know you shared this as one of your favorite verses. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I know we talked a little bit earlier, and that's a promise from God. And so, as parents, as challenging as it is, you're in that moment of like, I don't know how to do this different. You know what? Go to God. He will help you, and He will be right there. So just be encouraged. We want to, there is hope. And I know, Connie, we're going to wrap it up here. I know we talked about maybe giving the parents a little assignment to leave them with. And so what kind of assignment would you like to give them?
I think we're going to add something to this.
Okay, great.
And we're almost out of time. So I want you to think about this. God promises you He will strengthen you. You don't know what to do, He's going to give you the strength.
Yes.
God promises you He's going to help you. I want you to think about the Lord holding out His hand saying, they are my kids. I've given them to you. I will help you. Yeah. And then that man that said, I don't know what to do, I want you to visually think about, Lord, I don't know what to do. He's going to lift you up and He's going to help you. So my assignment is I want you to practice, as we were going to talk about this, but being available. Busyness, time, as you had said, be available. So this week, all I want you to do is I just want you to look for a few areas where maybe you're so busy, your schedule's full, but you say, I'm going to be available from here to here. Or if you come in and I'm cooking, or you're coming in and we're riding in the car together, I want you to be available. And I want you to ask your children, hey, I want to get better at listening. I want to be better at when I say something to you. It builds you up. It lifts you up. Yeah. It's good. It's good for your soul. It's good for your heart. It makes you know how much I love you. So my challenge is ask your children, hey, are there some areas that I could do better at listening? Now you got to be careful with this. And Carl and I were saying, we don't want to ask our kids to rate us, because if you're not in a good place with your children on that day, you're like a 1. And if you're in a good place with your children, you may be at a 10. And they may be like, oh, you're perfect, Mom. You always listen. I want you to ask them how you can become a better listener. Maybe it's not talk so much. Maybe it's not react. Don't go, don't react. Maybe it's sit and pray with your child. Maybe it's something simple of saying, you know what, I know you'll figure it out. Let me know if you want my advice. Ask them if they want your advice. And the second thing I want you to do, our last one, is look for ways that you can plant a positive message, of Bible verse, a blessing, where a Post-it note on the mirror in the bathroom, in the car seat, wherever it is. I'm challenging you to look for ways you can catch your kids being kind, doing the right thing, being the child that God's created them to be, and tell them.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. So you have a homework assignment. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Connie, for being for sharing that. That is some good meat.
So we only put like
book.
40 pages in there. So apparently we didn't get it all in, but we tried.
We did. And if you haven't ordered the book, just want to encourage you to get it, because it is valuable information. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you next week, next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Have a wonderful evening. God bless.